And we're back with another episode of Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It's Gerald Glassford coming back at you here from ISFF, Lakers Fast Break, where we cover the latest news and notes from the world of the NBA and the Los Angeles Lakers. Also, as well, the Pop Culture Cosmos, where we cover the latest news and trends in pop culture each and every week, twice a week, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, as well, of course, all the great stuff that we do around the world for you and the world of fantasy football. Please go ahead, like and subscribe, and on the Lakers Fast Break, become a member today for just $2.99 a month. You get emojis, badges, inside stuff that only I send to our members, including reviews, articles, plus also as well season predictions on the NBA. Way ahead of everyone else for members for just $2.99 a month indeed. But it is, of course, NFL Week 7 coming up here. Week 6 is in the books. And in the interim between week 6 and Week 7, there's been a couple of notable trades, wide receivers going places. That's what we're going to discuss as the major topic for today. And here to discuss that with me is a good man indeed, along with his son, Dominic Lardieri. They make up the duo Lardieri's for Domination Sports Nation. It is, of course, Chris Lardieri. Chris, great to have you here. So sorry about the Mets, who just got shellacked in Game 3 by the Dodgers. New York has still got a Yankees roaming around, still having some fun, hopefully in Cleveland for Yankees fans out there. But that being said, Week 6 is in the book in the NFL, and some changes were needed to be made, and they did so this week for some wideouts.
Yeah, great to be back, Gerald. This is the earliest I can remember big trades being made in the NFL season. I know the deadline's extended to the first week in November, but one of the worst kept secrets, Davante Adams is reunited with his BFF Aaron Rodgers in the Meadowlands. And then shortly thereafter, the Bills acquire Amari Cooper from the Browns, essentially resurrecting his career, which wasn't going to go anywhere with Deshaun Watson as his QB. So I think Josh Allen and company have to be happy. And I think it has fantasy implications too, not just on the field.
Absolutely. So with that said, my friend, your thoughts on the trades at hand. Obviously, for the teams that were trading out, like the Raiders and the Browns, it's all about getting those higher draft choices, the second rounders, the third rounders, based on how far they and how well their teams do, the new teams that they're on, plus how well they perform. But how do you think both those teams did in acquiring Amari Cooper and also as well, of course, Davante Adams?
Yeah, the putting the salary cap and all that aside, because I have opinions on that, but that's not our area of expertise. But from a fantasy perspective, I think it's good for both teams. It's definitely going to help Aaron Rodgers. Now, as someone who has Garrett Wilson, I somewhat worry about his productivity. On the flip side, teams are not going to be able to just key on him with, the sheer fact that Adams is such a respected target in the NFL. I know he's older, but teams are going to have to account for him too. So I'm wondering if while the target share may get divvied up a little different, maybe that prevents more opportunities for Wilson, who had a nice game against the Bills, but was getting crushed late in the game. He can't do it all by himself. Alan Lazard's not a viable option. So I think if you're an owner of Jets players on the offensive side, I think that's good for you. Now, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be, 2018 or so Aaron Rodgers overnight, but it will definitely help his value here in the near term.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is my cohort in crime, Chris Lardieri, right here from the Domination Sports Nation. If you have any questions, please put it so in the chat or isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com. Want to go ahead and mention, though, with these trades, a lot more expectations are now made on these New York teams. And last week's episode, we talked about two quarterbacks that were struggling in New York in Aaron Rodgers and also as well Josh Allen. Did we even say, and I actually said, might want to strongly consider benching Josh Allen, but Josh looked a little bit better this time around, but with Amari Cooper, who I know he's gotten off to a terrible start, Chris. I know he's one of the league leaders in drops. I don't know how they discern those drops. That's like the plus minus in basketball. Is it
Yeah.
that or isn't it? So uh, for me as well, his average per yards, it's just not where Amari Cooper was with both Dallas and then Cleveland. But I don't want to say he's washed because I told you the other week saw firsthand what he can still do. He actually caught an 80 plus yard touchdown pass, ran it all the way to the house. Unfortunately, got called back, in a season marred with errors for Cleveland. That's, again, one of them right there. And that would have been the difference that I think would have won them the game against the Raiders. But be that as it may, I'm going to say for Cleveland, I think it's time that they need to go ahead and start looking into different options for tanking because at what is it time for them to tank and is it time for the Raiders to tank also?
I think so. I mean, both teams are in dire need of a quarterback. The Browns dug their own hole with this awful Deshaun Watson contract, but regardless, they're going to have to eat the cap hit and deal with the hell for a few years. But, if they're talking, there's probably at least, anywhere from 3 to 5 good quarterbacks coming out of college into the draft in 25. So now's the time to do it. Do the reboot now. And then on the flip side, we last week I said don't panic with Josh Allen. I think this helps him. You could say what you want about Cooper. He's not as productive as his Raider or Dallas days. But by the same time, when the Browns changed quarterbacks last year after Watson got hurt, Joe Flacco was connecting with him. So I think it'll definitely help him from a fantasy perspective as well. And I think it opens up the Bills offense, which has been struggling to say the least.
To say the least, indeed. So with the Raiders, though, at that second half against Cleveland, they looked a lot better, but that first half was a mess. They looked like that they had no discipline. They had really no sense of where they were at. Their coach, it just looked really bad as far as the coaching out there for Antonio Pierce. I thought, okay, that second half, they got things together, they got their act together, and things are going better. But again, we saw the next week at home in that Pittsburgh home game. Excuse me, it was the Las Vegas Raiders, but I would have never
Yeah,
noticed because there's so many Pittsburgh fans there that it's just a team. I think that without a solid quarterback in Gardner Minshew, aka Gardner Mincemeat, who I call him, and then also as well Aiden O'Connell or Aiden O'Connell on his back. I just think it right now that they need to look into a different direction as well. Both these teams are in sore need of talent infusion, and I think this what they did this week are just steps in that right direction to get them better personnel so that they can compete on a better basis.
absolutely. And hand in hand with that, for fantasy owners, I would strongly encourage you to stay away from any Raiders and Browns offensive players unless it's, last resort. You need a bye week fill in, that sort of thing, because you look at the Raiders, between those two guys, they don't have one starting quarterback put together. Until Watson gets benched, the Browns offense isn't going to do much of anything. I feel like, yeah, Nick Chubb will come back, but all that'll do is have teams just keying on him, the opposing defenses. So I don't see a heck of a lot of value for Chubb once he does inevitably return.
So let's get into what happened in week 6, some of the trends that you liked, some of the things that you saw. What were some of the interesting things? And then obviously Detroit going into Dallas outside of the horrific Aiden Hutchinson broken leg, which I don't want to say that's the worst one I saw. That's nowhere near the worst one I saw as far as compound fractures are concerned, but still, it's a nasty, nasty one at that. Outside of that injury, they dominated. But what are some of the interesting things that you took away from NFL Week 6?
Yeah, there are a couple things I think, and this kind of got forgotten because it was a Thursday night game, but the 49ers offense looks like it got back on track really quick. I don't know if that's a function of the Seahawks defense being so poor or the 49ers rebounding, but I feel though, as we head into the second third of the season, that that team, regardless of whether they have McCaffrey or not, I think they get back on track. I think the NFC West is clearly a winnable division. The other three teams are struggling, so I think that bodes well for Brock Purdy and the receivers. On the flip side, the Philadelphia Eagles just can't get out of their own way offensively. Nice to have A.J. Brown back. I've got him in one league. He scored a touchdown, but Jalen Hurts and now Saquon Barkley are struggling. Things could improve this week in this sort of grudge match where Barkley makes his return to MetLife Stadium after the Joe Shane and company let him walk to Philly as a free agent. But I think big picture, Sirianni with his hijinks, bringing his kids to the press conference afterwards. There's a lot of nonsense going on in Philly, and it's clearly affecting the offense.
It is. It is. And I think that some changes do need to be made, but will they make them or do they have the personnel to do so, my friend?
Hard to say. I mean, this is a team last year at one point was 10-1 until they completely went into a tailspin. So, it's not like the team's been beset by injuries, had a mass exodus of assistant coaches, even changing head coach. I know Sirianni's been under the gun and the owner was rumored to be considering firing him this offseason, but I just don't know what's happened. I mean, part of me wonders if the players, the rumors are true and the players just really don't like Sirianni, but I don't get it because I know the Browns have a decent defense, but you got to put up more than 13 points against a team like that.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is, of course, Chris Lardieri from the Domination Sports Nation, along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks again for watching, listening. Truly appreciate you doing so. So with that, my friend, let's head on over to NFL Week 7 before we go into our picks for Week 7 and also, of course, the Woof 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 Doghouse. For fantasy football owners out there, what are some of the more interesting matchups you feel that you can gain an advantage this weekend?
So judging by just a complete annihilation that the Lions laid on the porous Cowboys defense this past Sunday, I think this Vikings Lions game is a real interesting one, not only for the football fan, but for fantasy managers. I think both these offenses have been clicking. And unfortunately, like you said, with the brutal Aiden Hutchinson injury, that's going to affect the Lions pass rush. So, Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson and company up against a defense that's got to kind of re-scheme things. I think we could see offensive output on both sides of the ball. So that's one that definitely interests me.
One that interests me is Seattle at Atlanta. How much do you take stock in what Seattle is putting out there on offense, despite the injuries? And then Atlanta, Kirk Cousins, Drake London, who I have as receiver in one of my teams, Bijan Robinson. Pretty good offense to get behind if you've got those players on your team.
Yeah, definitely. I think the interesting thing again is every time Tyler Algier's been written off, he gets more and more carries, and we saw it again on this past Sunday in Carolina, where there was kind of the two-headed monster at running back. Algier got more touches. They didn't throw as much as they had in previous weeks. So if you're a Bijan Robinson owner, I can understand your frustrations. You don't know what you're going to get from week to week.
Any other games stand out to you from a fantasy standpoint? Because right now, we're in the zone right now where all the waiver wire pickups are all gone. You're just basically at this point trying to see if you can stream a defense, maybe find a kicker, maybe even a tight end that might get on a hot streak on the waiver wire, but pretty much has been picked dry at this point in time. So what are your thoughts on as far as where you go, or are there any trade options out there that you think might be worth taking a chance on?
Yeah, just looking at waivers from week to week, it's getting thinner and thinner. So, like you mentioned, you need a kicker for a bye week. You need a defense for a bye week. You're going to get what you're going to get. Tracy, the running back from the Giants, had another good week, and most leagues he got snapped up. If he was still out there this week, he's not anymore. So I think what you've got to do is just keep an eye on guys who are starting to get more touches at running back or more targets at receiver, tight end. That's about all you can do. In terms of trade, as I just keep hammering home year after year, buy low, sell high. And a couple of weeks ago, people were ready to bail on Brandon Ayuk, and I feel like he's got some value going forward still. I'll hold firm to that. I think too, there are guys like Anthony Richardson at quarterback. He's been banged up. So if you've got him like I do in 2 leagues, you need to make sure, because there are still some decent quarterbacks when I look out there on waivers every Monday and Tuesday. You've got to make sure if you've got a guy who's injury prone or maybe headed into that questionable status, as we seem to see every Wednesday when the injury report comes out, you've got to solidify that backup quarterback position. Even though Richardson's back this week, I know he's got a favorable matchup, but we're starting Jaden Daniels and Jared Goff in our 2 leagues just because they've been producing, and we don't know what we're going to get with a guy like Richardson. So things like that you need to take into account, and then too, like you've been saying the past few weeks, your proverbial favorite Joe Flacco on the bench. If Richardson doesn't produce, do they kind of pull the plug and go with Flacco with the hot hand like the Browns did last year? It'll be interesting to see.
What is it? 6 touchdowns and 1 interception since he's come into the fold as the starting Indianapolis quarterback.
Yeah, great story. Guy was on his couch this time last year.
Yep. I'm just saying, that's all he does. He might be 90 years old back there behind the center, but he gets it done. He's accurate. He is like a statue, so don't expect him to run anywhere. Don't expect any running touchdowns, guys. But if you want a guy that gets a nice completion ratio, somebody that could get you 250, possibly 300 yards, sometimes 2-3 touchdowns, interception here or there. But he's been really accurate so far since coming back this season, Chris.
Yeah, at this point in time, I know we've been big Geno Smith fans, but I'll take Flacco's production over what Smith's been putting up the past few weeks.
Got a question from one of our viewers. John M. said, if you had to drop one, who would it be in a 12-team PPR league? Javante, W, Algier, have Bijan. He has Bijan, by the way. That's why. Okay. Bucky or Pickens?
Oh, so we've got Javante in one of my leagues, and that's a bone of contention between Dom and me because I've been telling him we need to drop him the last few weeks, and he had a good game, and Dom won't do it. He's got some sort of attraction to Javante, but as long as Bo Nix is quarterback, of the other running backs you have, I still like their upside. And as I mentioned, if you've got Bijan and you still have Algier, you've got to hold on to him in case of injury. I know I'm old school with my handcuffing, but I've seen it happen too many times. Even if the guy's out for a week, you're going to go out there and look on waivers and realize it's crickets for running backs right now.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is Chris Lardieri along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much again for watching this. We truly appreciate it. Before we get to the woof, 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 the doghouse, I want to go ahead and look at some of the games this weekend that are attracted to Chris on a entertainment basis betting style deal. So if you want some picks, come to the right place. Chris is usually the man to get it from. Joe Soro is actually just talking about the Dodgers right now. But for us right here, it's week 7 in the NFL. So, Chris, I ask you, my friend, doesn't necessarily have to be a underdog, could be a favorite, but something that really stands out or some games that really stand out in your eye this weekend before we get to the doghouse.
Yeah, I'll actually give you what ended up being a close runner-up in my what was in my contention for my doghouse pick, and that's on Monday night. An excellent matchup between the Ravens going down into Tampa to face the Buccaneers, and the Bucs. It was a tale of two halves for them, and they just completely lit up the Saints in the second half. Let's not forget Baker Mayfield beat the Lions earlier this year, and I think that's going to be a good matchup. And if you're looking at it from a Vegas perspective, I'm scanning Vegas Insider before the show, and it looks across the board like the Bucs are getting 3.5 points. So yes. That was really tough for me to decide between that game and the one I'm inevitably picking. But I like the Bucs there.
Yeah, you like the Bucs in it? Okay. Over under 48.5 in that game.
Wouldn't be terribly surprised if it goes over because both teams are definitely putting up the points this year. And, if it ends up being a warm night in Tampa and those defenses get gassed, we could really see a fourth quarter light up, shoot out the scoreboard or what.
I will say, though, for me, that's not a doghouse game. A game that I like besides the one that Chris just mentioned. I think that the Tennessee Titans and Buffalo Bills, I think that as far as taking the Bills, I know it's not good odds, but I think that the Bills, in this case, you're probably going the over on the 42.5. I think they're going to have their way with the Titans. I think at this point, especially that they got some momentum coming off of last week, I think I like what I see there. And then on the road, Tennessee has not been good at all this season on any stretch of the imagination. So right now, I really think there's a lot going on in Tennessee that's wrong. So I think it's going to be Bills by 2 touchdowns personally, and I think they'll cover the 42.5, Chris.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I think Tennessee's just a matter of time before they're a sinking ship of a franchise, and they'll be in the mix with the Raiders and the Browns for a quarterback next year.
So before we head on out, my friend, it is, of course, Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Always glad to answer your questions. Put it in the chat below. If you're watching this after we go live on the air, go ahead and drop it in the comments, and I'll see if I get it by Chris to make sure I get you a prompt answer. But before we head on out, it's that magical time again, the time that we head out still on the lawn. And here in Las Vegas, our lawns, which are usually not really green, they're kind of rocky because desert landscaping and all. It's still 95 freaking degrees outside in Las Vegas. Although I have been told by Laker Nick that next week is going to be much better here in Vegas. So I'm looking forward to that. So with that, my friend, it is time. You look out across the desert landscape and you see everything that's going on, and you take a look over to the right, and dog's kind of lonely, kind of sad, got the ears going down things. So you may have to make sure you go and woof 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 head over to the doghouse and pet that dog. So Chris, the doghouse is now open. Who do you have as far as your underdog for this week?
Yeah, first off, like to thank the Seahawks. I have no excuses, no bad refereeing, no bad coaching. The Seahawks just stunk. It was a terrible pick by yours truly. So we're gonna move on from that. The aforementioned Lions Vikings game. When I first start scanning the lines, sometimes things stick out to me, and this is one where I did a double take. The Lions, I managed to find a friendly book in Vegas that still has the game listed as plus 2.5. You know me, I love my 3 points or more, but I'll take it. I flat out think the Lions can win this game. Taking nothing away from the Vikings, I think they're a great story, but watching that London game, they flat out got lucky. Rodgers made some terrible throws, and the Vikings didn't even want to put a poor offensive unit of the Jets away at various points of that game. So even though they've got the bye, I just think the Lions are humming right now. They're a team even more united around Aiden Hutchinson's brutal injury. And I think they win this game outright. Now, I know these teams tend to play close games. It's the NFC North, anything goes, but pretty confident I think the Lions win. And if they don't, I would be fairly certain that 2.5 is enough of a cushion for them to cover. I think Goff and company beat the Vikings by a sizable margin, but I'll take the points.
In the matchup of the week, my friend, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Taylor Swift Express is heading over to the Bay to face off against Laker Tom's favorite football team, the San Francisco 49ers. So with that, my friend, I know it's a close one. I know it's not a stretch by any stretch of the imagination. You talk about a doghouse, but for me, Chiefs are the favorite, my friend. I'm going with the home team and the underdog. I think the 49ers are starting to get a little right. I think Purdy is showing to be a consistent, effective, higher level quarterback. I think if they have the running game, because I know that there's some injury questions there, and I know McCaffrey won't be back, but if they do have the running game support that's healthy enough, I think they'll get it done against the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll take the 1.5, my friend. I'll take the 1.5 indeed.
So I've got just looking at it here in Vegas, they've now got the Chiefs as underdogs. Is that what you're seeing too?
As of 2 p.m. on the picks, I don't see it on Vegas Insider. I could still have the Chiefs as the 1.5 favorite. So it may be flip flopping back and forth depending
I
on where
see
you go.
plus 1.5. That was another one I did a double take
So
on.
I think
I
some
don't
money's
get
been put on the 49ers. That's why.
Yeah, but and then too, like just the Chiefs are undefeated. I get it. San Francisco's tough, but they've gone in there and played them tough. And then let's not forget everyone's favorite stat, Andy Reid after a bye week. So this one kind of surprised me. The money must be flowing.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, it's been a great show as far as your predictions and all your thoughts on fantasy football and the NFL Week 6 and upcoming Week 7 are concerned. Truly appreciate it. But before we end it out, my friend, you have to give us an update on what's going on with the Domination Sports Nation.
Thank you, Gerald. In addition to the NFL, there's plenty of baseball to talk about. Both New York teams making it to the championship series. The Dodgers are in it. Yankees look like they're in a good driver's seat position, up 2-0. So plenty of playoff baseball to talk about, which is nice compared to last year. We really had some snoozers and an even more boring World Series. And then college football has been flat out terrific. The Oregon Ohio State game was a barn burner. Great game, 2-3.
I thought
And
they were going to lose it, and
oh,
you know what? The 12 man on the field gimmick worked. That was a smart ploy that they used, and they got it done.
yeah. But then, too, like a friend of mine, an Ohio State alum, brought up two good points. You see, is if that's done deliberately, shouldn't that be an unsportsmanlike conduct? And as well,
Okay. And yeah, I
back
agree.
on the clock. So, yeah, I mean,
I've lost Chris right now for a sec. I'll get him back here in a second.
teams
There
will
you are, my friend.
still be playing in January, and hopefully they face off again at some point in the expanded playoffs. And then, too, we got another doozy this week with Georgia at Texas. So you say what you want about college football, and it's got its faults, but with these expanded conferences, we got a lot of games that are just epic here in early to mid October, things we weren't normally accustomed to under the old system. And then, too, we'll also, recap our fantasy thoughts. I know Dom's always got thoughts on UFC. I always defer to him on that. You can follow us on Instagram at Domination Sports Nation, and I'm on Twitter, which I refuse to call X, at Chris L Sports.
Before we edit out, you and I were talking about it after the USC debacle. Once again, um, we are not I'm going to say we, but USC fan base, the USC alumni are not very patient.
Hmm.
Are the days in Lincoln Riley almost done?
I think they're going to be calling for it. I mean, it's
They should be calling for it now,
yeah,
personally.
yeah. I mean, you lose to Minnesota, lose to Penn State, which is a shocker. James Franklin's never met a big game that he doesn't fold in. So frankly, I think they got a couple of gifts there, missed field goal, and then they went on one in overtime. But yeah, we're here mid October, and I think the calls will get louder and louder now. If they lose to UCLA, I think that'll really be loud, but I don't foresee that happening. I am actually going with Dom to see my alma mater, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, play at the Coliseum. Dom's never been there. I've never seen a Rutgers game outside of the state of New Jersey, so I'm really looking forward to it. So at some point in early November, on that week's show, I'll have a report for you, Gerald, on how SC looks in person and kind of what the vibe is there with the fans and the alumni as regarding Lincoln Riley. I mean, the knock on him, he got Oklahoma teams to the playoffs numerous times, but conference was a lot different back then in the Big 12. He always seemed to get himself a quarterback every year. And the knock on him is, the in-game management. He's a recruiter. He's not really a coach. So we'll see what happens. It looks like there's been a lot of the same at SC.
Before we edit out, my friend, I'll share my thoughts on it because I think the hot seat should be really hot right now for Lincoln Riley. I've really been disappointed as far as where their issues are. They cannot seem to get anything right as far as an overall team concept. Last year was the defense. This year it's the offensive line. It's a train wreck, and they just seem to be always patching things up. Like there's a fire one area, or there's a dam that's bursting piece by piece, and it's just part of it's leaking. You just put a finger in the dike in one area, and then you try to put a finger in the other, as a new leak comes out, and it just seems like they're not addressing the state of the team overall. I just think absolutely the blame should go on the athletic director for ever allowing this team, UCLA's team as well, Washington, all those teams. You could even say Oregon, although Oregon's thriving right now, they're doing okay. I think that was a very stupid move for these teams to move out of the Pac-12 and into the Big Ten. Just absolutely was a dumb move. and it's going to be in the long run something that they will realize is a mistake.
Well, you hit the nail on the head with long run. Everything's short sighted. It's money now. The highest bidder, who's suiting me, who's being a suitor coming after me, and I get why the teams went on a money grab. But let's face it, the Pac-12 imploded. They had to have one of the worst commissioners in any level or form of sports, professional or not. Couldn't get a TV deal, and now the conference implodes. And here we have, looking forward to 26 reforming. I mean, you even got Gonzaga to join for basketball. So I just can't figure out how all these teams bailed if they had waited out and been patient. And this goes too for Stanford and Cal. It's an absolute joke they play in the ACC that, Miami's going to Berkeley to play them. So, money talks, but at the same time, it seems like anything else, Gerald. You probably see it in the entertainment world. Everything kind of merges together. It divests and breaks into these little fragments, and the fragments are all chaotic. And like, we got to get everything back together under one roof and consolidate. And I feel like that's what collegiate sports has now become too.
Once again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. It is, of course, Chris Lardieri and I, Gerald Glassford. Thanks again for watching this thing. We'll be back next week. But again, if you need any of those questions answered, please put them in the chat below if you're watching this after the fact. Or you could go ahead and hit us up, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com. Yes, R.I.P. Liam Payne. Very tragic death indeed. Very sorry to hear that. I know there's a lot of young ladies out there that are very sad right now as far as the loss of Liam Payne at this time. But
yeah, including my daughter.
Yeah, my daughters as well. I could say that very, very much so, because it is the talk right now amongst young ladies under 25 right now with the death of Liam Payne. But before we head on out, cool, bro. It is probably in your best interest to become a Swiftie, and I'll just leave it at that. If you're a 15 or 16-year-old young man that's out there, become a Swiftie. And I'll just say maybe your life is a little bit happier. I didn't say you have to like a music. I just said become a Swiftie. And there you go.
I mean, Travis Kelce's the poster boy for that, right?
He was a musician. He was part of One Direction, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah.
One Direction, yes, with some very notable names, including Harry Styles, Niall Horan. Yes.
Yep. Yeah,
Wow.
and to show you how clueless I am, I know Harry very well, but my daughter and her friend went to see Niall at the Forum earlier this summer, and when Dom told me the news today when I picked him up from school, I said, "Oh no, that wasn't the guy that she saw in concert, was it?" He said, "No, that was Niall." So yeah, I knew he was in One Direction, but didn't know if he was still the solo act. So I'm halfway there, right, Gerald?
You're halfway there indeed, my friend. But this weekend looks like another great weekend in the NFL. Again, it is Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Chris Lardieri and me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks again for watching this thing. Again, if you have any questions, as always, isfantasyfootball@yahoo.com, or just put your name in the comments. And we'll go ahead and put your question there on trades, waiver wire pickups, starting lineups, whatever you want to go ahead and talk about in fantasy football. We try to answer it for you right here at Inside Sports Fantasy Football.